Sourced from 60% certified wood fibers and 40% recycled waste plastics, Naia Renew cellulosic yarn is intended to make sustainable style possible for everyone. Naia Renew can be used to create luxurious fabrics with a silk-like finish, rich luster, and wonderful drape, or soft cocooning materials for everyday comfort. To learn more, visit naia.eastman.com.
Hello, everybody. This is Imran Amed, founder and CEO of the Business of Fashion, and welcome to BOF Live. Today, I'm thrilled to have Kenneth Cole, who's joining us, to have an important conversation about a topic that Kenneth has a really passionate perspective on. We managed to speak a few weeks ago, and I'm delighted to have you here today. And Kenneth, I wanted to start by asking the question, how are you really doing today?
So I guess we're going to speak about that, but I'm okay. And but what Imran made reference to is probably the single most asked question every day of the week, everywhere in the world, and the one most rarely answered. But in this time of COVID, we're doing a lot more reflecting and looking inside and out, and trying to come to terms with all of that. So I guess that's what we're going to speak about.
Exactly. Well,
today,
I wanted to start with this idea. It's in the title of today's talk, which is, mental health as the other pandemic. I mean, we've all been really focused, of course, on this deadly virus that's, still spreading all around the world. But perhaps a less discussed and equally important topic is a mental health pandemic. And, one could argue that actually, this is something that predates COVID, but the current situation has really kind of amplified the importance of this discussion. So why don't we start there? Talk to us a little bit about your perspectives on why we should be treating this as the other pandemic, as it were.
So I don't know if people know my resume, my experience, but I lived in the world of HIV for 30 years. And I did a stigma campaign about HIV, about AIDS in 1985. And no one was talking about it. It was on everybody's minds, it was on few people's lips because of stigma and the devastation of stigma. And if you were presumed to be part of this at-risk community, you were stigmatized in every regard in your lives. And I did that. I joined the board of AMFAR. I was the chairman of AMFAR for 14 years. I stepped away from that about a year and a half ago. And it became apparent to me that there was this other public health crisis that was so much bigger in so many ways that it was oblivious to in the ordinary course. And 1 in 200 people today still live with HIV, but it became clear that 1 in 4 live with mental health condition. And that, I argue, is not 1 in 4, it's 4 in 4, because if it isn't you, it's someone you love, it's somebody if not in your family, in the community or in the workplace, but we're all living with mental health conditions, and we're all struggling with it in different ways. And how do you deal with it, the humanity of it, and also the practical aspects of it. So so that was pre-COVID, and that was so I set out down this road, and I was asked by some friends at NAMI if I would consider working on a destigmatization initiative for mental health. And it seemed like a lot of people were focusing on this. I knew little about it. I had hardly the credentials. I'm not a clinician. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a mental health person. I'm not a public health person. But I'm a branding person. I'm a perspective person. I mean, that's a perception person. That's what we do in fashion. That's what we do in our business. And that's what I did with HIV for a lot of years. And I figured I'll do it, but only if I could really build a coalition, because this needs to be a cultural shift. This can't just be, put out there a kind of a new narrative, a new vocabulary, a new way to talk about mental health that wasn't debilitating, but in fact empowering. I asked 5 psychiatrists for a definition of depression. I got 5 different answers, and none of them were empowering. So nobody's going to own it. No one's going to discuss their circumstances that way. But meanwhile, it's so pervasive and it is so debilitating. And 1 million people, 200,000 people have died in the U.S. from COVID as of now, and it's getting larger. 1 million people are going to die from suicide this year, and this is not something that we even realize how pervasive these concerns are. And the reality is that 2/3 of the people with mental health conditions live and exist so in the shadows, and they're not comfortable addressing it, and they don't know how to address it. So in any case, we built this coalition. Everybody, and we systematically, NAMI says we're in, and then we went to the suicide prevention line, and the crisis text line, and Mental Health America, and Child Mind, and JED Foundation. Went to the 25 largest mental health organizations in the country. They all said we're all in. We'll support it. We'll bring resources to it. We'll empower it to the degree we're able, and you're able. So we set out down this road, and then along comes COVID, and everything's turned upside down, and we realized that we need to accelerate this thing. And by the way, the one thing that, so everybody now gets it, that mental health is more debilitating than COVID in many ways. COVID is profoundly impacting us all in so many ways, but it's not going to be as lasting as the impact of it, and all the ramifications of it. The uncertainty that everybody's living with today is overwhelming, and we don't know. Nobody knows what they're doing and what life looks like on the other side of this. And so the practical aspects of it are overwhelming. But the other thing that people don't talk about with mental health is the business case for it, which I try to make, because the reason resources don't come to this is because it's not made adequately clear how, in fact, this impacts our not just qualifiably but quantifiably, and it is the single largest cause of disability. That is a large cause of lack of loss of productivity in the workplace. $1 trillion a year apparently is lost because of depression and anxiety, and that's the cost to the global economy. And in the workplace, I think I'm looking at some statistics I just written down before. 264 million people suffer from depression, which is the leading cause of disability. And depression and anxiety together cost the global economy $1 trillion. And the productivity losses are so much higher. They're the highest cost to most organizations. And employees who self-diagnose lose 27 lost workdays in a calendar year. And they also will acknowledge that 25% less productive even when they're at work, because of this overwhelming condition. And at the same time, last statistic, then I'm going to put this piece of paper away, 80% of employees, when treated, report significantly improved levels of work efficiency and satisfaction. So you know what the problem is, and it's so debilitating to our economy, and to the work environment, and it is so, and the humanity of it is so overwhelming, and knowing it impacts so many people in our lives, so many people that we love and that we're so close to, and some we know about and some we don't. And this is going to go on. This gets exacerbated by COVID. There was a study done after SARS, after the quarantining from SARS in Asia, and which is not anywhere as intensive and expansive as this is. And 1/3 of those people who came through self-isolation and quarantining, it acknowledged degrees and symptoms of PTSD, and another 1/3 of depression. This is so much longer and so much more pervasive. So I don't think any of us have the ability to get our arms around the impact this is going to have, and is currently having.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot to unpack there.
Sorry,
Let's start with the basics, right? So
right.
there's a general lack of understanding about mental health as a medical condition or disease. How, when you're talking about it, and clearly I know, I appreciate you're not an expert, but it's a space that you've really immersed yourself in. Like, if you're talking to someone who maybe hasn't really fully grasped all of the immensity of what you've just walked us through, how do you talk about mental health in the most basic way? How do you have that discussion in a kind of starting with the most kind of elementary understanding of it, so to get people on the journey of understanding, the kind of huge impact it's having on our society?
I think we tend to be judgmental, and we tend to characterize people and prejudge people. And I think it's hard to not do that. And it's something that we need to do. We launched an initiative, which you were referring to a few minutes ago, which we accelerated in light of COVID on May 15th, called How Are You Really? The How Are You Really Challenge. And we challenge people to go on their social media platform and be vulnerable and tell people how you are, and allow yourself to go to some place where maybe you haven't been. And there's all this great science that speaks to the powerful impact that it has, not just on the storyteller, but also those that engage with it. And then create this platform, which actually was created by my daughter, called howareyourreally.org. And so people, you can log on, you can put yourself out there, and you can be vulnerable, you can be empathetic, or anywhere in between. But to the degree you put yourself out there, and then people can engage with your story, with your content. And they can encourage you, they can support you, and then you feel empowered. It's extraordinary how just allowing yourself to be who you are, and how much impact that alone will have, and can have. So I think there's social media lights up. Arguably, it's a big cause of the problem, and I think social media realized that they need to also be part of the solution. And we're having a lot of conversations with people at Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah. So, but how do you have that? What I'm trying to understand is, like, when you're describing mental health to someone who's not engaging with it, what is it that one can say to them, or what are the words or language you use to describe what mental health really is?
So you can express a level of empathy at the beginning of a conversation, and how are you, and express it, ask the question in a way that encourages and suggests a willingness to really hear how they are, and not be judgmental of it. If you go to our website, mentalhealthcoalition.org, there is we have a narrative. There's a vocabulary that you can look to on ways to talk about this, how to have this conversation specifically to your, as per your point. And there's also a resource library of resources that are available from the universe of our partners across the country, what you can default to and what you can reach out to. But I think, I'm reluctant to tell you specifically how to do this. But I think if you just put yourself out there as a clinician might, and ask questions and be supportive and be non-judgmental, and listen, it's amazing how people will respond.
Mm-hmm. One of the things you alluded to earlier was that sometimes people don't even know they have a mental health condition, or they don't know, we don't know that someone else might have a mental health condition. And there's a stigma around talking about mental health, which is kind of similar. You were talking earlier about AIDS. And I remember in the 1980s and 90s, there was such a stigma around, that disease as well. What did you learn from your experience in HIV and AIDS around destigmatizing these kinds of health conditions that people don't really want to talk about or don't feel comfortable talking about?
Well, in the more, our first campaign that we ran in 1985 spoke about the fact that nobody was speaking about it. And just putting yourself out there and welcoming engagement goes a long way. And what was different about HIV is that there was specific populations that were stigmatized. Early on, it was intravenous drug users, it was gay men, and largely, and it was Haitians. But COVID affects it. Mental health affects everybody. As I often say, big and tall, old and young, black and white, and Jewish, Muslim, and Christian, and more importantly, Democrats and Republicans. So, and it goes across the aisle. Everybody's impacted by it, and so in some ways, maybe it's harder to identify, but I think you just have to assume everybody is overwhelmed by it today, and nobody said no to us, which is indicative of that, because HIV we were selling ourselves all the time, and we always had to make the case why this is something you needed to support and be empathetic and responsive to and respectful of, but mental health, it just isn't that way. I mean, everybody gets it. Everybody understands it. Everybody has somebody in their life that's struggling.
Mm-hmm.
I had never seen anything like this before.
Yeah. I mean, we all, so there's been a question that's been put in the Q&A that I think is an interesting one, because pushing for a concise definition of what mental health is. And Jim Nowakowski is asking, so mental health is the mind. Like, what is a healthy mind? Its characteristics. Everyone gets depressed once in a while. We all have our ups and downs, but what's the difference between kind of healthy mental health and unhealthy mental health?
What we say is that everybody has mental health, and we all have different degrees, and we have ups and we have downs, and we have periods where we're feeling, more in control than others and more confident than others. Everybody has physical health that they need to address, and their mental health they need to address. And unless you have both in a good place, you're not healthy. And and there's a whole universe of people out there that do this. We have certain partners that have mechanisms and where you can help self-diagnose and to try to understand, from maybe a clinical point of view, where you are at a given point in time. But there are real resources to help you and to help people cope and to help people deal with what they're dealing with, and and come through this in a way that that is empowering. So, but part of it is I do believe is putting yourself out there and not lurking in the shadows, because that just doesn't work.
Yeah. You were talking about mental health and its economic impact, and I'm really interested in those data that you were citing earlier. There's been a conversation in our own industry, the fashion industry, about mental health as well over the last few years. And, people have said that our industry, operates at an unsustainable pace, not in terms of the environment and the planet, which I think we also know, but also in terms of the impact on people that work in this industry, whether you're, a factory worker, churning out, clothes and having to meet certain targets, or you're a creative director having to, amp up the speed and volume of the collections that you're putting out, or, as an editor who used to have to go to Fashion Week and spend 3 months of the year running around, in what is a highly charged industry. What as someone who's got an accomplished career in the fashion industry, I mean, do you see fashion as having its own specific challenges as an industry that it needs to combat with regard to health and mental health?
I think fashion probably more than most is dealing with this thing head on right now. And I think fashion industry is a perception industry. And we are all, how we are perceived often is how we see ourselves, and it's looking in the mirror. And were my reviews good? How many likes did I have on this post? Or how many compliments that I get from this editor as opposed to, we define ourselves so often by these external forces that we can't control. And to the degree you allow them to take hold, then you become a victim of that. And I often say fashion is what I do, it's not who I am. And but if you allow fashion to define you, you're gonna struggle.
Yeah.
That's because the reality also is, and also by definition, no one's going to love everything. And what's fashion to you is not to somebody else. And what's fashion today may not be tomorrow. So you can't live your life that way, and that is not sustainable. To your point, and it's when you guys run around the world to fashion shows, Fashion Week in Paris and New York and in Milan and in London, that made sense before social media, when you didn't have immediate access to everything from wherever you are. I think we've learned a ton, by the way, during COVID about global accessibility, that you don't really have to go very far to have access to all this inspirational content and meaningful ways of guiding, what you do in the ordinary course.
Yeah. The other thing you mentioned earlier that I want to unpack a bit is the role of social media. A lot of people this week are talking about that new Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma. I don't know if you've seen it, but there's more and more research that suggests that the relationship that all of us have in terms of looking for validation or projecting a certain self-image or watching what other people are doing on social media and somehow letting that make us feel somehow inferior or less adequate. What have you learned in the work that you're doing around mental health about how social media has, played a role in this growing pandemic?
Look, it's played a big role. I mean, when you're forced to look in the mirror constantly, all the time, and you allow yourself to be subject to the feedback and opinions of people that you know and you don't know and you respect, and some you don't, you never are going to come through this thing in a healthy way. But unfortunately, that also, our industry embraces it, encourages it, and rewards it. So, and the more likes you have and the bigger audience you have, the more access you will often have, and you get rewarded for that. So, and everybody's trying to process this and figure it. And I think this is intuitive. I think people understand that, but it's, these solutions are not easy to come by. We did a couple of campaigns over the years. We did one, Everybody's Life is Better Than Yours. And, as we introduced our campaign, our new collection, and it's only become more so. So, and for young children who don't have the foundation to process it, to deal with it, it's even harder still.
Yeah. There are things that we can do as business leaders to address these topics in our own company, right? In our own companies, in our own industry. It's something, we have a whole mental health network at BOF, and, we've been able to, set up some training and awareness and learning opportunities for members of our team that are interested in learning about it. What do you think is the role of leaders in companies in terms of helping to destigmatize mental health, in terms of making those conversations open so that if someone is struggling, they don't feel, afraid or stigmatized to talk about it in the workplace?
There are best practices, and we have some of them also on the website. And, we we worked with NAMI originally when I started this journey, and we incorporated certain initiatives that have, I think, been embraced by everybody. And we have mental health days where people can take time off, and you create an environment where people can talk about, what their issues. They don't have to. It's not the dog ate my homework sort of thing. So, but I think there are best practices out there of what other companies are doing, because everybody's dealing with this thing. There is nobody that's that's removed and that's going to get out of this unscathed. It's part of we all have to address this at some level.
Okay. I'm going to open it up to questions from the community in a moment. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to type them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. But I just wanted to kind of conclude my own questions by talking a little bit more about the Mental Health Coalition. So if people are interested in kind of availing themselves of the resources that you're compiling with all of these organizations, where are you focusing your advice and energy, and how can we kind of learn from it?
So we have the mentalhealthcoalition.org. You can go there. There's a resource library. You can see the universe of our partners, and they all have extraordinary resources. And there is so much great work that's being done. There's great science that's being done, and I do think that if you can aggregate all this great work, and I do believe 1 + 1 = a lot more than 2, and we can bring all these great efforts together, shine a light on it, and ultimately bring resources to it, and eventually marry needs to resources, so that this is what the universe of what exists. This is the needs are pervasive, and this is what they are, and ultimately connect the dots, which is our ultimate objective here. And it's an extraordinary opportunity to make a meaningful impact in so many people's lives, and it's a gift that I've been given to play the role that I play. And so you go to mentalhealth.org. You can see a lot with this. You can engage with some of the social media that's going to get better. And then there's also howareyourreally.org, and you can engage. You can put yourself out there. I did it, and I have never done it before. And understanding what was my voice in the mental health space, I needed to find one, and I didn't realize how in fact real it was, and how enabling it was, and how meaningful it was. And I spent some time thinking about what is going on in my life, and how I've been overwhelmed by COVID, and all the demands that I have on my life every day by so many people in my life, and how do I deal with that, and how do I show up for everybody? Do I have the right not to show up for everybody? And we all deal with this at different levels, and it's hard. So, but just having the conversation is a big first step.
Okay. We do have some questions that have come through. So the first person I'm going to call upon is Olivia Smith, and she's going to join us on screen here to ask her question.
Hi, sorry, excuse the mask. I'm on campus and I have to wear it.
No problem. Olivia, welcome. Where are you today?
Thank you for that.
I am at Auburn University in Auburn, Alabama.
Oh, great. Nice to meet you. What's your question for Kenneth?
I was just wondering, I kind of missed the first part of the conversation. I'm sorry, I was in class, but I was just wondering what advice you have to students. I'm a senior, and in the apparel merchandising program here, it's highly ranked in the country, well respected. But I'm still nervous about getting a job. I had a great internship this past summer, but it was all online. So I'm just a little like, what do I want to do? How do I know I want to do it? Because everything's online. So I was just wondering what advice you have for students in my position.
So, I mean, is it more like a career path, Olivia?
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Sorry, Kenneth. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. If you're thinking more kind of career-wise, I think I've always felt that in tough times you have the greatest opportunities. the whole industry is in upheaval right now, but our industry isn't much different than others. And but I do find that creative alternatives are you have the ability today to engage people in ways you never could before. You have such a captive and receptive audience for anybody who comes at something from an innovative point of view. And there is still a massive need for content and for product, and people still going to consume. They're going to consume differently, and they're going to, and everybody in America has a full closet. So we have to give you a reason to change out something that's already there. We don't empty our closets every season and start all over again. So I think that, and it's not just it's form and function today. It's not just what looks good. And I don't personally believe, and I think everything has to, it has to fit, has to feel good. Ultimately, it has to do good. So I think that if you look at it from a fresh perspective, I did actually a commencement speech recently, and I talked about a 2020 perspective. You could probably look it up on YouTube or something. Sure. And to look at, just take a fresh look at the world today. 2020, it used to mean perfect vision. And today everything's upside down. But I think you have a unique ability to look at it with very different credentials. And you're not kind of bogged down by all the baggage that we all have to process. And which is all the ways we used to do things and all the resources that we used to put at them, and we still do. And how do we transition to ones that make more sense today? So I often say you got to put yourself in the shoes of the person you want to do business with, and in my case, hope to they'll want to put themselves in mine. But I love your mask. I love that you are in school and that you took a break from class. And I love that classes are happening now, and that the world's getting back. Yes, and I wish you luck, Olivia.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate all these. I've been following him. Imran, I'm actually from Texas. We have met before. I have been on here before. So I am actually at school now. So I'm not in Dallas anymore. I am in Auburn. So it's great to be back. I was abroad, so I haven't seen some friends in a year. So it's really great to be back.
Well, welcome back, and thank you for joining and following.
Thank you, as usual. Live. See you next time.
All right.
All right.
Our next question is from Adela Bodaska. Just wait for Adela to join. There's Adela.
Hi.
Hi, Adela. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you?
Good. Where are you in the world today?
I'm currently in Cambridge, UK.
Okay. What's your question for Kenneth today?
Okay, so I actually have two questions, but first of all, I would like to say that it's very nice to meet you both, and thank you for the opportunity. So yeah, the first question would be, you were talking about the initiatives you took regarding mental health in the workplace. Would you be able to expand that a bit more?
Well,
what kind of initiatives?
So we've done two things. First, we're on two paths. One is a new narrative to change culture, to change the way people talk about mental health, come up with a new vocabulary that's non-clinical, non-stigmatized. That we're working on one now that we're going to be hopefully have out into the world within a month from now. And we started with the storytelling platform, which is called howareyoureally.org, encouraging people. There's a place now you can go. It's a safe place. You can tell your story. You can make it available to others or not, or to whom you want. And and then there's this other one, which is going to be more about self-expression, which is where you're going to be able to, in a non-stigmatized way, you're going to be able to express yourself every day to your universe in ways that are empowering and hopefully in some way fulfilling. So that's what we're doing, and so that's the narrative, and then the other part is building the community. So we put together all of the coalition of the most important providers, service providers. We have some great business partners and who are helping us. We have great media partners who that we're working with, and we're talking about maybe putting together a business coalition as we speak, because we've had a lot of interest, and where people can share resources, and because there's so much dilution and loss of productivity, as I discussed earlier. And I think there's a lot of synergy that can come from people collaborating and communicating. So thank you for that question.
Thank you. The next question would be, what's your perspective on music or art therapy? If you are,
I love music. I love music. I always have. I always often personally default to music, but there are all these platforms today. Meditation is a great one. There's things that help people, and it's a very personal thing. And some people love to run, and some people love to swim, and some people find their space differently, and some people, and I think it's a very personal journey that everybody embarks upon, and but it's one worth focusing on, and nurturing it. It's what I would encourage people to do. I mean, I also meditate, and I try all the above, and I find they help me. So and there's so many platforms today to do all of these things, and they're accessible to everybody.
Right.
So.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks so much,
Thank you.
Adela.
Thank you, Adela.
We have one final question, which might touch a little bit on what you were just discussing, but I think it's worth inviting Dawn. Now, I don't know how to pronounce the surname, so I'm not going to try to butcher it, but maybe we'll let Dawn explain how to say his surname. Hi, Dawn.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for allowing me to participate. It's a great conversation. As a 53-year-old HIV positive man, I appreciate the work Kenneth has done to date. So thank you so much for that. So here I am in Manhattan, Midtown, and I've been here the whole time and really looking for those things, whether it's something I say or do every day to try to either get me up and get me going or get me up from where I might have fallen to. And so I was wondering, Kenneth, are there things that you do or say to yourself? Do you light a candle? Do you have a cookie? I mean, what is helping you?
I think part of the biggest problem that the world is dealing with is the underlining notion that you're expressing is the uncertainty that we all have. And it's never been so overwhelming to all of us, not just some of us. And it's not just the impact of COVID. Will we be stuck in this apartment in Midtown Manhattan for a week, for a month? Will I have a job tomorrow? Will I have people to go out with? Will I have places to go? Will I have so that, on top of the political landscape, it's never been more polarized, and there's this big election coming up in 30 days. What is the impact of that? It's significant, and that's an American problem, but it's not. It's actually a global problem because we're seeing that happening everywhere. Will there be a vaccine? How will that change things? Will I take it even if there is? And so this is, I think you just got to find a safe space where you can be comfortable. I think I'm intent on wanting to make an impact, and that's what we set out to do. It's what I set out to do personally. It's what I set out to do with my business. And how do I use my resources to make a meaningful impact in people's lives? And not just how they present themselves to the world, but culturally how they interact with the world and how they do it. And that kind of does it for me personally. But I have more different resources than other people. I get that. And but I do think that there are so many ways you can make an impact today because everybody's struggling, everybody in different ways. So, and I find meaning in that personally, and it does a lot for me. And you go online today, and there's infinite amount of tools that are available to everybody today to help us navigate.
You know what? Thank you for saying those exact words, because you've actually turned it around from a me to an outside. Like, what can I do to contribute to the better? And using you as an example, that's like a mind shift for me. And it actually coincides with this book that I'm listening to from Tim Gunn, who's talking about mentorship and teaching and, just doing. So less about give me a cookie or pet me, like, okay, I'll feel better, I'm sure, when I help other people feel better. So thank you for that direction. I love that.
Yeah, thank you, Don. The thing is, I can feed you today, but then I got to feed you again tomorrow, or I got to feed myself today. But if you can do something that's sustainable, that's more meaningful over time, then it's something that you can, a platform that you can build upon.
So good. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And good luck to you. I'm also in Midtown Manhattan right now. So, but I'm feeling very positive. My brother-in-law is our governor, and he has been a great example of what leadership can be.
Tuning in every day and putting it on my stories. I can't say enough about the leadership. That's another great example of what we're talking about, like do for others and lead and show strength. So yeah, that's fantastic. Maybe I'll see you on the West Side Highway if you bike or run.
You just might, so be careful. Thank you, Don.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Don. There's one final question, Kenneth, and I just want to see if Ayotunde is available to join us, because it has a very good question that would be great to discuss. Is Ayotunde there? Okay, maybe not. Maybe I'll just read out the question. I'm Ayotunde, a mental health. Oh, there they are. Hi.
Hello, I'm right here.
How are you?
I'm fine, I'm good. I'm tuning in from Nigeria, and it's great to be at this meeting.
Amazing. Thank you for joining us. What's your question for Kenneth today?
Yes, I'd like to know if there are specific mental health challenges amongst those in the fashion industry, apart from the general problems that people have had to deal with in this pandemic. I'm a mental health specialist, and in the middle of the pandemic, I started a mental health initiative, and I provide mental health information. So I would really be interested in knowing what directions to go and what things to focus on if I have clients in the fashion industry, and what are the specific mental health concerns that we may have.
Great.
So, how is Nigeria shut down? How badly were you impacted by COVID? I'm sorry if I asking that question.
Yes. So COVID-19 in Nigeria is nowhere near what you've experienced in the US. Here in Nigeria, the numbers have not been as high. And certainly we're not doing enough testing, but then evidently we don't have it as bad. Our healthcare system is not that good, but then for some reason we don't have a lot of numbers in terms of the prevalence of those that are having COVID-19, but certainly it has affected the economy. And we had a lockdown earlier in the year, particularly in March, April. Right now, the lockdown is easing out, but then so many people have been affected. Many people have lost their jobs. It has also affected various people, even domestically. So we've had more cases of domestic abuse because now more people are at home. So they have more access to those that are at home, and there have been a lot of clashes. So as a mental health specialist, I've had to deal with a lot of people complaining about anxiety, depression, and those kinds of complaints. So right now I'm curious about, apart from the general population, what's it like in the fashion world, and how best does one collaborate?
I think, look, congratulations for what you do. I think it's very noteworthy, and I compliment you for that. So I think that and whenever you allow your self-worth to be defined by others, you're very vulnerable. So, and that is pervasive in our industry, in the fashion business. So, and it's perpetuated not just by all these collections and designer clothes and then on top of that, social media then amplifies it out to to the greater universe. So, and that's hard. And to the degree people are able to not allow themselves to be defined by that, then they'll be less vulnerable to it. And that is what I would encourage, my daughters and clients if I had them. I'm not a clinician or a mental health person, but I admire what you do, and I think fashion can make you look good and feel good, but you just got to keep it in context all the time. Right now, there are no seasons. We're all trying to figure that out. What seasons are we designing for? What should the next collection look like? And who is our audience, and who is consuming and who isn't? And it's uncertainty again that is at the root of so much of our disruption and people's struggles, and just not knowing what they should wear, and what they what they can do, and then what they should do, and how they should appear in the world, and how they should be perceived to appear in the world. So I think what you're doing is great, and there is huge evidence that supports what you do, the impact, the positive impact that it has on people. So and now there's so many opportunities to help people because everybody's struggling. So I wish you lots of success in your efforts, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ayotunde, for joining us.
Thank you, Imran. This is a very beautiful meeting.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Kenneth, we're almost out of time. Do you have any concluding thoughts or comments that you wanted to make?
Well, I think that I thank you for what you do. I think having this platform is also speaks to how the world is changing, and how I love the fact that we just spoke to people from, I think, 3 different continents, and the world has gotten very small. Yeah. And it's not about building bridges today, because there are no physical bridges, are meaningless. And I think everything comes together, and I think resources can be leveraged everywhere. And I think what you're doing here, and putting forth a point of view, and bringing meaningful resources to this broad audience is so important. So it's profound in certain ways, and I'm sure it's appreciated by so many. And it is reflective of this new world. I mean, we're all reimagining, reinterpreting, recontemplating. Where are we going? As our conversation a few minutes ago with that woman from Texas. So, and I do think this is a part of where we're going.
Yeah, and I'm really grateful for your time today, and for sharing some of your perspectives with us. I know you're not a mental health clinician or expert, but it was just good to hear from someone who spent more time talking to people in the space. And I think, given the global audience that's joined us today, it's clearly a global issue, just as you pointed out at the beginning. This is an issue that merits more open discussion. So hopefully this won't be the last time. But thank you for joining us, Kenneth. And thanks to all of you from all around the world joining us on BOF Live. If you'd like to get more information on future events, you can visit businessoffashion.com/events.
Also, by the way, if anybody has certain questions, and I'm happy to engage with you further, you can go into my personal social media. I'm Kenneth Cole Real, or the brand, but Kenneth Cole Real, and either Instagram or Twitter. And I'm happy to engage with you further if that is helpful to anybody.
That's a very kind and generous offer. I wish you all the best, Kenneth. Hopefully we'll meet in person someday, but until then,
I look forward to that.
All right, take care.
Maybe you can see Don and I on the West Side Highway.
Maybe. Well, I'll need to get across the Atlantic Ocean first, but let's see when that's possible.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you, Imran. All the best.